والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد, inshallah ta'ala, we'll talk about Zakah, which is one of the pillars of Islam. And talking about Zakah would not be definitely covered in one session. It needs a series if we want to cover all topics and all aspects of Zakah. We might not cover every single mas'ala or every single issue, mainly the things that is related to the people here, but still there are many issues, especially with the many different transactions that people invented, and they have so many different things. And so we'll try to cover all that, inshallah ta'ala, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us life. So today, inshallah ta'ala, will be the first session, and hopefully next time will be Thursday or before that, because we can decide at the end, inshallah. But Thursday after Maghrib, this is there, or we can decide also for a day before that. But weekends will be difficult because a lot of time is coming weekends. When we talk about Zakah, before getting into the fiqh part of it, by defining it linguistically and then religiously, and what are the conditions of it and the pillars of it, and the different types of means of Zakah, and who are entitled to be given the Zakah. Before we get into this, there are some meanings that we need to observe. Some of these meanings is that when you look into the acts of worship in Islam, you would find some acts of worship there is no apparent benefit physically in this life from what people do in their worship. Like, for example, throwing the Jamarat al-Hajj. Right? People do not see anything physical in their life as an outcome of this. This is ta'abbud mahd. This is nothing but a worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, every act of worship has a great benefit. But the benefit to the worshipper, to the one that is observing the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but not necessarily that this benefit would be extended to others, like the salah for the main part and so on. So this is one type of acts of worship. And it's meant to be this way so that people would submit themselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without seeing even a benefit in their life with this act of worship. Why this, why that, before that, and so on. It's just because they are slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second type, which is the total opposite of this, part of the religion, but might not be something that needs an intention for as a matter of worship. Like, for example, paying back your debt, or helping a person when he is in trouble, saving someone from death or drowning or something. You see something on the way, on the road, and you help someone or you give someone a ride. You don't have to focus and to have intentions to do certain act. This is a rewardable act, and you would find it in the deen of Islam, but without necessarily focusing before you do it that you have to have a special intention for that. And the third type, which is combination between both, and like the Zakah. The Zakah is an act of worship, and it's meant for the person to do that for his own self, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It purifies oneself, and at the same time there is an extended benefit there, in which the poor and the needy will have a benefit of this. So this is basically one first meaning that we need to observe, that as Zakah is an act of worship, that the one that gives the Zakah, he needs to purify his wealth and purify himself, and this is an act of worship, and also the effect that he will have onto others. Also, when we look into the Zakah, as the ulama they mentioned, this is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for those who claim to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by giving away what they love sometimes the most in this life, which is wealth. Wealth, al-mal asab al-haya, is the nerve of this life. Can you see that? The main thing of this, everything you will find it is functioning by matters of wealth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought down wealth with its different types to be test for people. And there are many ayat of the Quran talks about this, and the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So one of the acts of worship is to purify ourselves from the greed that is in our nature as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, and to be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Sadaqah Burhan, as the Prophet ﷺ said, charity is an evidence of one's love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and one's iman, and a person gives from what he loves for no benefit but for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another meaning that whether it's to be given openly or secretly, right? And both are mentioned in the Quran about those who will spend their wealth openly and secretly, and both are praised by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we think about what is more virtue, in general, or originally, when you give something like that secretly, it's more rewardable. When you give something secretly, it shows the sign of sincerity that the person is not showing off. But sometimes, since it's mentioned that it will be given openly, sometimes to give something openly, as the ulama they say, has a benefit. People might follow your way, they would get encouraged, they would see that this is something being practiced, so they would follow your way, especially if you are an example to others. So doing something openly, as Zakah for example, since it's fard, you have to, especially if people know that you're a rich person, right? And people are created differently, and people will see each other, they will know who's rich and who's poor, and this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. So when the poor see the rich, that he is giving for the sake of Allah, sometimes it's a benefit, so that they don't envy the rich. So it depends on the context, but both are rewarded and both are mentioned and praised in the Quran. When a person gives for the sake of Allah, like the Zakah and others, he should not ruin it, because it does not work that a person will give it and that's it and it's secure forever. He might ruin it by al-mann wal-adha, for example, by reminding people of his favor upon them, or by hurting others with a word or so, that he would say that I gave you this and you don't deserve it, or things of that nature. And since this is mentioned, it's very important concept that we need to know and to convey that to others. And non-Muslims, for example, they don't understand this in matters of charity. In Zakah, it's not a favor that you're doing to the poor. Zakah, the obligatory charity, this is the right of the poor in Islam. This is their rights. So it's not a favor from the giver. No, it's a favor from the poor, that there's poor people, so that people would give from their wealth to purify their wealth and purify themselves. So a person should be grateful to Allah, should be happy. When he's giving the zakah, he should rejoice that he had an opportunity to give for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the portion that is to be given as zakah, obligatory charity zakah, this is not your money whatsoever. This is the money of the poor. That's why when people withhold the zakah, and the severe punishment as a result of that, because there's someone poor on the face of earth or needy, that he is suffering because of the greed of that person when he withholds his zakah. So this is the right of the poor. The optional sadaqah, yes, it's your money, and out of your good will and seeking the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the person will be elevated in the levels from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it's not a right. The right is the zakah part. That's why a person, when he gives the zakah, again, he should be happy that he has the means to do that. The companions radiallahu anhum, they reached a higher level in which in the optional sadaqah, they would rejoice so much, they'd be so happy when someone would come to them, ask them for money. Not zakah, this is already taken care of. Their optional sadaqah, they will enjoy that somebody came and asked them so that they would give them. They used to thank the poor and not to make them feel that this is a favor from them upon them. The poor would come, he's thinking that he's doing them a favor, right? So this is a very important point. A person should never belittle what he's giving, because it's all according to one's intentions. So if the zakah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordained, and the ruling is that you have to give that certain amount of money, even if it's something little, if this is the obligation, do not belittle it. This is something very important. It's wahi from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came with regarding to this. When we give also the zakah, it should be from the midst of one's wealth, not the worst of it. And it's best, of course, to give from the best type of wealth. When we say the best, because sometimes you give the zakah something other than money. So if it's animals or it's goods or whatever, so you give from the best of it, from the good ones of it. But when it comes to wealth, of course, you give, there's no difference between one or the other. So this is another meaning. go to another meaning also that we should observe this when we're giving the zakah. We should observe the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the haqq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that this is because it's the order of Allah, so you're fulfilling the rights of Allah. And also one's rights. This is your own right, taking care of oneself so that a person would not lead himself to the hellfire. Saving oneself from the hellfire and purifying oneself. And that's why the zakah, and the word zakah linguistically comes from an-nama, from something to be increased, something to be purified. So the person is purifying himself, purifying his wealth and his self to seek the salvation and the forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Having this to be said, then when we talk about zakah, or the ulama when they talk about zakah, like any other terminology in the deen, we should look into it linguistically and religiously. Linguistically, the word as zakah comes into the meaning of tahara, purification, comes from the meaning of barakah, blessings, something that something increased, and all of that is mentioned in the Quran and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. We want to get into mentioning the many examples of this, but you will find this clearly in the Quran and in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. It comes also in the meaning of something sound and strong, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَأَرَدْنَا أَن يُبْدِلَهُمَا رَبُّهُمَا خَيْرًا مِنْهُ زَكَاةً وَأَقْرَبَ رَحْمًا. That for the Surah Al-Kahf, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the two orphans, that Allah for the two parents with their child that Al-Khadr killed, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted for them someone better, zakatan, meaning salahan, meaning righteousness and upright and so on. So this is something that brings all means of righteousness and goodness and so on. The word zakah also can refer to one's self. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, He is successful, the one that made zakah to himself. What does that mean? Purified himself. And there is sadaqatul fitr. There's a sadaqah at the end of the month of Ramadan. This is a zakah, something to be given as a way of purifying one's fast and so on. And zakat al-amwal, which is our topic, which is one of the pillars of al-Islam. The zakah being one of the pillars of Islam, and we know that from the Quran and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And you would find many verses in the Quran always having the salah with the zakah. Qimu salata wa atu zakah. Around 27 ayat like this. The salah and the zakah are always mentioned together, they're never separated like this. And in other verses, like 3 verses or so, you would find the zakah mentioned alone. So this is many verses in the Quran that talks about this. It's an act of worship that was not unique for this ummah, it's also for the nations before. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran about Bani Israel, وَجَعْلْنَاهُمْ أَئِمَّةً يَهْدُونَ بِأَمْرِنَا وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْهِمْ فِعْلَ الْخَيْرَاتِ وَإِقَامَ الصَّلَاةِ وَإِيتَاءَ الزَّكَاةِ وَكَانُوا لَنَا عَابِدِينَ, that they also were revealed for them to give the zakah. And the mithaq, the covenant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, was taken from Bani Israel to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone and to be kind to the parents and so on, and to establish the zakah. So this was given also to the previous prophets. And there are many ayat and hadith that talks about the punishment of those who would not give their zakah. Zakah, before we mentioned just one hadith as an example, originally zakah is supposed to be the work of a state. Right? This is the state work, right? Where the Prophet ﷺ used to send the ummal or the workers, the collectors of the zakah, they go so that the individuals, they don't have to worry about zakah. This is something tough for the individuals to deal with, right? It's like of course, nothing compared to the taxes, of course, but it's something like this. It's something where it's to be collected. So you don't worry about the zakah, you have someone to come and check what you have and audit what you have in a nice way, not that he's trying to take your money. He's trying to apply the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your money, so you will be happy as a Muslim that somebody is coming to help you to fulfill the orders of Allah, not someone is trying to take your money for their own benefit or their personal gain. No, it's for your own benefit and for the benefit of the poor, because the zakah is limited to only what is mentioned in the Quran, those who are entitled for the zakah, not for paving the roads and taking care of what needs to be taken care of a country. No, these are specific categories only for the poor and the needy and so on and so forth. So the people will be enjoying this. So since this is a state work, when this is not been practiced anymore, it becomes a difficult task for an individual. But should we then say we have an excuse to relax it or to have mistakes in it? No, there's no excuse. And that's why at certain times, when the reward is more for those who would hold fast to the religion, then it has to be observed and people have to be patient. So many people, they neglect the zakah or they pay it wrong or they don't do it the right way because of the lack of knowledge, because it's detailed and it needs knowledge and so on. So the person either has to have the knowledge or to ask the people of knowledge, especially if you have wealth, especially with the complexities of things nowadays. It's not like a simple one portion of money you get once a year. No, it's all complex and money goes in and out and businesses and very complex transactions. And it's all there saved for us how to do it. But we have to, there's no excuse. It's forbidden. It's forbidden. It's a major sin. Subject the person to the punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if a person delays the zakah even one day. It's haram to delay it for one day. That means one day there's a poor person somewhere, he is suffering as a result of this delay of getting out the zakah. And some people, they have many misconceptions. They think that they can, okay, the time for the zakah comes, they give out the zakah and then they would keep it with them, but they would give it as payments for the poor or so. This is not permissible. It has to reach the poor and it can be given early but not to be given late, as we will see inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warned those who would keep their gold and silver and so on, وَالَّذِينَ يَكْنِزُونَ الذَّهَبَ وَالْفِضَّةَ وَلَا يُنْفِقُونَهَا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ فَبَشِّرْهُم بِعَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ يَوْمَ يُحْمَى عَلَيْهَا فِي نَارِ جَهَنَّمَ فَتُكْوَى بِهَا جِبَاهُهُمْ وَجُنُوبُهُمْ وَظُهُورُهُمْ هَذَا مَا كَنَزْتُمْ لِأَنفُسِكُمْ فَذُوقُوا مَا كُنْتُمْ تَكْنِزُونَ. That those who yaknizun, a kanz is the treasure, when you hide something, when you put something under the ground or you hide it or you keep it for yourself, you save it, and you don't give it its rights, the rights of others. Those who would do that for the gold and the silver, their wealth, and they don't give the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with regards to the zakah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran that to give them the glad tidings of a severe torment, punishment, that this gold and silver will be burned as plates of gold and silver in the hellfire, and they will be stamped with it on their forehead and their sides and their backs in the day of judgment. This is as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, there's a long hadith. This is to be done in the day of judgment, not even when they enter the hellfire. This is in the day of judgment, which is 50,000 years long. Those who used to not pay the zakah, they will be punished there. And then after the punishment for that long of a day, then they will be seen their affairs, whether they will go to Jannah or the hellfire. Meaning Muslims dying in the state of Islam, but they didn't use to pay their zakah. This is their punishment in the day of judgment before even the decision whether to go to the Jannah or the hellfire. In this hadith, I will mention some portions of it, but it's important to mention that hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, that the Prophet ﷺ said, مَا مِنْ صَاحِبِ ذَهَبٍ وَلَا فِضَّةٍ لَا يُؤَدِّي مِنْهَا حَقَّهَا. There's no one that has gold or silver, and the like of the gold and silver is the money. Does not give the rights of it, meaning the zakah, إِلَّا إِذَا كَانَ يَوْمُ الْقِيَامَةِ. Unless in the day of judgment when it comes, صُفِّحَتْ لَهُ صَفَائِحْ مِنْ نَارٍ. It will be made as like plates from the hellfire, and it will be in the hellfire, and then it will be stamped on one's forehead and one's back. Every كُلَّمَا بَرَدَتْ أُعِيدَتْ لَهُ فِي يَوْمٍ كَانَ مِقْدَارُهُ 50,000 سَنَةً. It will stay on that person till it cools down, and then it will return again to the fire to be heated, and then comes back on the person in a day its length 50,000 years long. This is how long that is when a person would withhold his zakah. Then حتى يقضى بين العباد فيرى سبيله إما إلى الجنة وإما إلى النار. Till the people will be judged among one another by the judgment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then it will be seen whether he will go to Jannah or the hellfire. So this can be an expiation for his sin, if that's the only thing, and then after that he can go to Jannah. But the punishment in the day of judgment for a day, its length is 50,000 years long. And the hadith goes on with those who hold the zakah, if there is zakah with regards to ibn or camels, they will be given a space for them in the day of judgment, and the camels will come and would run on them back and forth, right? The whole time for 50,000 years and so on, whether he withheld camels or cows or goats and sheep and so on. And the same thing till whether he will go to Jannah or the hellfire. The zakah, as we said, it's immediate, it's not to be delayed, and that's why the uquba or the punishment, a person subjects himself to this punishment, even if it's delayed, and that's why it has to be done immediately once it's mandatory. It can be done earlier, no problem, but not to be late. The zakah should be in the wealth and not necessarily the person. Meaning, as we know that the acts of worship needs for the person to be mukallaf, to be in the age of puberty, and to be, having sanity and so on. The majnoon, the insane person, he has no responsibility, he's not held accountable for his actions, he doesn't have to make salah. But when it comes to zakah, there is zakah in the wealth of the insane, and there's zakah in the wealth of the orphan, and zakah in the wealth of those who did not reach the age of puberty yet, right? So the zakah is with regards to the money and not necessarily the person. Who will be responsible? Of course, the orphan, the small, the child, the insane is not going to be held accountable because he's not responsible, but those who are the guardians in charge of them, they are responsible. And if a child reached the age of puberty and he discovered that his money that he inherited or whatever was not given zakah from, the parents or the guardians didn't do that, they didn't know that, then they have to go back every year and pay zakah. It does not get cancelled over time. Right? You can't say, well, it's been 50 years ago that I'm supposed to pay zakah, well now it's too late. No, that's not too late. Zakah does not, لا تسقط بالتقادم, right? It is not cancelled by being old, right? The sentences in prison and so on, after some time they cancel it, zakah no. This is the right of the poor that has to be paid no matter what. Even if a person dies and he didn't pay zakah, they have to get this zakah out of his inheritance first before they distribute it to the inheritors, right? So under any condition, it's all about the wealth. If it's there and it's valid for the zakah, then it has to be given for the zakah. And as a rule also, everything that is not to be or anything that cannot be used for trade, you would not have zakah on, right? That's why if a person is living in a house, there's no zakah on this. You have a car you're driving, there's no zakah in this. Even if you have, 2, 3, 4 cars, but for your personal use, there's no zakah on it, right? You have more than one house, there's no zakah on this, right? But once something is for sale, then there is zakah with specific rulings. Also, inshallah ta'ala, will mention that. So your personal belongings, there is no zakah on it if it's something that is to be used. What are the different types of wealth that the zakah is mandatory and you have to give zakah if you have these things? Is with the details, of course, but just briefly. Bahimatul an'am, but as-sa'ima. Bahimatul an'am is the camels and the cows and the goat and sheep. These 3 types of animals, these are bahimatul an'am. It has to be sa'ima, means that it's being left free or so. We'll get to the details of that inshallah. The other one is al-kharij min al-ard, anything that comes out from the earth, from grains and fruits and so on. And al-dhahab wal-fidda, gold and silver, and urud al-tijara, or the things to be sold, things for trade. Things are ready to be sold, also it has zakah. Also another point before we get into the details of this, what is sufficient for the person to get out the money of the zakah, or it has to reach the poor? Meaning, if you give your zakah money and then on the way it gets stolen, or it's, something happened to it and it's lost. You say, well, I gave it and it just something happened to it, or it has to reach the poor. There is differences of opinions with regards to this, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, and this is the opinion of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal and Ahnaf also, Imam Hanifa, that it's not sufficient unless it reaches the poor. So it has to reach the poor, then you have to seek rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and get it out again, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Start with left. If you start with the zakat of the gold and the silver and the athman and the money, and the cash money and everything, when they say zakatul athman, it has to do something with, as they say, al-iwad, which something that you have a value to it, something that has a value, right? Something that has a value, that it's taken between two parties as a buying and selling, or something that you earned, and has a value, whether it's money or the like of it. And that's why there is dhahab wal-fidda, or gold and silver. This is mandatory if people have gold and silver. Of course, with the conditions of the zakah, this is something that we didn't mention yet. But if with gold and silver, it has to be given out. But there is conditions for the zakah to be valid. The first one, the person has to be a Muslim. Before we get into the nisab, the conditions for the zakah, there are 5. First of all is al-Islam. That the zakah is not to be taken from the kafir, and is not to be accepted from him. The kafir, the disbeliever, under the rule of al-Islam, there's other means of having things to be taken from them. But zakah is only from the believers, and there are many evidences of that. And it doesn't mean that the disbeliever then he has a way out. No, because as the ulama, they say, the disbeliever will be punished in the day of judgment with regards to this. But there's nothing worse than a kufr. Right? So the person has to embrace Islam first before he can give the zakah. The second thing is that the second condition, that the person has to be a free person, not in slavery. So a person, if he's enslaved, it's not mandatory for him to give the zakah. We can just keep it as that, for the sake of time. The third condition, which is an important condition, of course, condition meaning that these conditions have to be there. If it's not there, then the person is not entitled to give zakah. Milkul nisab, that the person has to have a nisab. And nisab means it's like a threshold, if it's correct to say that, or a certain amount of wealth, that once a person has it, critical amount, once a person has it, and with the other conditions being met, then he has to give the zakah. As the Prophet ﷺ said, لَيْسَ فِيمَا دُونَ خَمْسَةِ أَوْسُقْ صَدَقَةً وَلَا فِيمَا دُونَ خَمْسِ ذَوْدٍ صَدَقَةً, and so on. He mentioned with regards to the nisab of the animals and the nisab also of the gold and silver. As we will get to know this nisab when we talk about the different types of mainly the wealth. The Prophet ﷺ, he said with regards to the gold, for example, 20 مثقالا, 20 unit of weight of gold, and this is something physically set and it's precise, that there's a way to make sure that you know it in grams, for example, which is something around, it depends on how good or what quality of bull or barley that you would get to weigh this, but it's from 75 all the way to 85 or 90 grams. So to be on the safe side, make it 70 or 75. Say 70, right? 70 grams of gold, or what's the like of this. It's definitely more, a little bit more, but to be on the safe side. And what does the nisab mean? As the next condition is the after the nisab, which is muday al-hawl, right? The hawl, which is number 5. Al-hawl is a whole hijri year has to pass while you still maintain the nisab. So for example, the gold is 20, or let's say 70 grams of gold. You have 70 grams of gold, and it stays to be 70 or more, not less, for a whole Hijri year. Then at the end of the year, you have to pay Zakah. How much? This is something else. But that means you have to pay Zakah. If you have less than 70 grams of gold, or what's equal to 70 grams of gold, then, and this is of course the pure gold, not the one that is mixed with something else, then you don't have to give the Zakah. So the nisab and al-hawla, they go together, that you have to have this, especially with regards to the gold and the silver. The silver, the nisab of the silver, is something around close to 600 grams of silver. 600 grams of, or 590 grams of silver. What is the difference between both? Of course, if you have silver, you have to measure it by the nisab of the silver. If you have gold, then you have to measure it by the nisab of the gold. But if you have money, you can measure it by either. And the best way to do it is to do what is better for the poor. And for those who need to worry about the nisab, those who have money, not much money, and they're on the verge of the nisab or not, then they have to worry. But someone that has, 10,000, 20,000, never go less than that throughout the year, they don't have to worry about what is the nisab and this and that, because they're definitely over the nisab and they have to be zakah anyway. So who has to worry too much or more about the nisab? When we say 70 grams of gold, how much is that? Usually, nowadays, something around 2,000. Nowadays, 4,250, are you sure? Or not less? Okay, say $4,000, right? Around this. Because the price of gold is obvious, very clear. You can check it online, you can check it in any newspaper, and it changes every day. So you see how much is the price of a gram of gold, and you multiply that by 70, how much that money is. This is the same throughout the whole world. So do you have this amount of money throughout the year, never decreased from this? If it's more, no problem, but it cannot be less, right? This is with gold. And if somebody wants to check, mashallah, this is also can be good. Or silver. Silver is definitely much, much cheaper. So the nisab for silver is how much? How much is the silver? Yeah, but how much would that be in dollars, for example? It depends on the prices of silver today, for example, right? So you want to see how much is the gram of silver, you multiply it by 590, you would see the nisab of the silver. And the nisab of the silver will be much less. So if you have that much amount of money, say 2,000, 1,000, or 4,000, right? Should I give zakah or not? Definitely it's better that you take it with the silver, because the silver, the nisab, is maybe less than half of the nisab of gold. So you would find the nisab of silver maybe $1,000. I'm not sure, but just something like this, something very small. So if you have your savings money-wise never came below 1,000 throughout the whole year, don't say I'll measure it with the gold. You can if you want, but it's better for the poor that you would measure it with the silver, and that you would give. It's nothing actually. It's only $25 for every 1,000, right? $25 for every 1,000, 2.5%. So these are the 5 conditions for zakah. Islam, to be a Muslim, to be a free person, not to be in slavery, and number 3, and nisab, that the person have to have nisab, and number 4, al-hawl, and there's number 5, they say istiqrar al-milk, that your ownership is there the whole year. You did not lose ownership of this money. What does that mean? Or they call it tamam al-milk, or milk tam. You have full ownership. Sometimes you have your money, but you can't have access to it. You don't have full ownership to it, right? For example, you gave someone a loan, right? And you don't know whether he's going to give it back to you or not. It's your money, and you should count this as your money, and you add it to your whole entire wealth, and you pay zakah from the whole amount, right? And zakat al-dayn, we'll talk about it also, the zakah of the loans. But what if that person, you have no hope that he's going to give you the money, right? That means you don't have to pay zakah on that portion. Why? Because you don't have full ownership over it. But if you know that he's going to give it back to you, you have full ownership over this money, so you have to count it as part of your money of your zakah. Or, which is a very famous example, if people have some form of it has to be halal, of course, pension plan or 401k or all of these types of things, right? It has to be halal, and this is a separate topic. If it's halal, if you have in some form of deal with the company that you work with, they take a portion of your salary monthly, take it out for to be given to you in a time of retirement, and they add to it the like of it or more, and they invest it for you. This like that, it's okay as long as they invested in a halal way. There's no riba and there's no dealing with stocks of companies that deal with riba. Nevertheless, that these companies are dealing with haram, right? So if all means are there and it's all permissible, then in that case, this money really, you don't have any full ownership over it, because you can take it at any time, right? It's only given to you after a certain amount of time. It's your money, but you don't have access to it. So should you pay zakah on it or not, you have to have the full ownership, the full access to it. How to do it? If there is no way that they can give it to you at any time, till, say for example, till you're 60 years old. Before that, there is no way you can get it, even if you're retired. I'm just making up my own example. In that case, without going into the differences of opinions, the correct opinion Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, which is the opinion of Imam Malik and others, is that a person, whenever he gets it, right, he pays for 1 year. Whenever he gets it, he can pay only for 1 year. If there's no way that he can get it before that. But if he can get it, but he would lose a lot, right, which is the case in many like 401k and so on, then in that case you have to make your calculations every year. So at the end of the year, or the day that you're supposed to pay zakah, for that money that is in the 401k, I mean regardless of the haram situation here, if you decided today that you want your money, you want to cancel this, how much they're going to give you today, right? So if they would give you, say, 1 million when you're 60, they will give you just 2,000 now, right? Because you're breaking it early, right? So if that what they would give you immediately, then this is, you have full ownership over this. You don't have full ownership of the whole amount, you only have full ownership of what they can give you today. So this amount of money, you should add it to your sum of money to be paying zakah on the truth, right? And we'll talk about that also later inshallah ta'ala, but the point of istiqrar al-milk or tamam al-milk, that you have the full ownership, this is a very important point when it comes to matter of zakah. So these are the 5 conditions for the zakah to be observed. Time is getting close, but one more point, and then if you have questions, then we continue, because this is, of course, this is just the beginning, inshallah ta'ala. When we talked about the zakah of the gold and the silver, and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and how this is calculated, this is again shows the perfection of matters of the deen. You would find things are measured by things that would never be lost throughout history, right? Like, what is the measure of wealth? It's not measured on something, a currency at the time that it disappeared and it's finished. It's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will decree for it to stay till the day of judgment. Like gold and silver, right? So you will continue to have gold and silver. And the amazing thing is that its price, of the gold and the silver, is something that is all over the world, is stable, and it's only one price. And so it's by the ease that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made matters easy for us. So again, the nisab of the gold and the silver, as we said, and this is from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and people can do that on their own, and they can measure it, but this is what we said. The 70 or 75, and some would say 80, some would say 85 grams of gold. It depends on how they weigh the barley and so on. So to be on the safe side always, it's to give, if you have 70 and more, then you give the zakah. And there is a fatwa of Hayat Kibar al-Ulama and others with regards to the cash money because this is definitely something that was somehow introduced, and it's not the same as the gold and silver. It might look like it's not the same. So, and whether it's reflect something of gold or not. So this is something that is consensus among the people of knowledge, that whether it has cover or not, with regards to the cash money, it's something that people should pay zakah on. People should pay zakah on it, and the same as the zakah of the gold and silver. Okay? So, this is clear with regards to the gold and the silver, how to give the zakah. And there are many issues and many questions, of course. The easiest part is when you have money that comes once a year. It's easy. Then you see how the money would happen, what happened to it throughout the year, as long as it does not go below the nisab. Once it reaches one Hijri year, then you give out of the total sum that passed the whole Hijri year, you give of that the 2.5%. For every $1,000, $25. But what if there is money coming in and out? Then this is something that either you have an accountant, or you make sure that you write everything down. If you want to pay by the penny, you only pay what a whole Hijri year passes on when it's over the nisab.